I knew that my dad was using drugs and from a really young age, and I didn't sort of tell anyone that I knew, but I knew a lot of what was going on. And of course, your parents, like, they try and protect you from things. So they probably tried to hide it, but I was always very, very vigilant and very aware of what was going on.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders. From purpose-led entrepreneurs to Olympic champions, you'll learn firsthand from today's successful leaders on what it takes to be brilliant, all in just 40 minutes. Today, I'm joined by Nikki Wicks, CEO of the amazing and hugely popular The Body Coach brand. Nikki's been involved with The Body Coach since its inception 10 years ago and has been leading the business as CEO for over a year. I had the great pleasure of meeting Nikki a few months back, and he came to join us on last year's Sifted Summit panel discussion, where we spoke about putting purpose over profit and how The Body Coach bring everything they do back to their core mission of helping people feel fitter, healthier, and happier, no matter where they are on their fitness journey. I am super grateful that Nikki has come back on 40-Minute Mentor for a special solo episode to share more about his own journey, his amazing relationship with Joe, and the amazing work that they're doing. So, Nikki, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for being here today. We've had the pleasure of already having a coffee this week. So I'm getting 2 doses of Nikki Wicks this week. How are things?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, it's twice in a week. I feel for you. I'm good. Firstly, thank you for having me on. We've spoken about this. I do get really nervous, like talking, and the talk I did with you at the Sifted Summit was like a big first for me. And although that was a recording, I sort of forgot it was a podcast because I was more dealing with the nervousness around the live public speaking element. I'd kind of forgot that was a podcast. But this feels like officially my second ever podcast that I've been on. So I think I'm a little bit less nervous than last time, but I'm definitely still a little bit anxious. But it's nice that we know each other and we've got to know each other a bit over the last couple of months.
Yeah, definitely. No, well, you're very humble. You were nervous before. You absolutely smashed it at the Sifted Summit. And I think it's just like any muscle, isn't it? You keep working on it. And your story is such a great one that I'm really chuffed that we're going to have a chance to dig into it a little bit more today. But as usual, in our podcast, we always like to start with some quick fire questions just to sort of warm you up. So if you could finish the following sentence for me, that would be awesome. So number 1, I grew up wanting to be...
Oh, I'm a footballer. That sounds super cliche, but I wanted to be a footballer. I think until I was about 16, I thought it was still possible. But yeah, I'll go footballer.
Nice. Who do you support?
Oh, I'm a big Chelsea fan. So bit of a weird time to be a Chelsea fan. But yeah, big Chelsea fan.
Yeah, Chelsea will have their time again. I've got no doubt. As I think a few of the podcast listeners will know now, I'm a long-suffering Aston Villa fan. So we're kind of on the up, but you never quite know with Villa. There is, yeah. And like you, I had aspirations of being a professional sports person. I frankly would have taken any sport. I just love all sports. Number 2, a misconception people have about me is...
Oh, this is a really hard one because you don't really know what people really think of you, do you really? But so some people are always quite surprised when I tell them I don't ever do any of Joe's workouts. I think people assume that I do lots of Body Coach TV or the app workouts. Now, I love Joe. We're very close, but I can't spend all day with him. I spend our holidays together. We spend our free time, a lot of free time together. Obviously, we work together. So when I get home, the last thing I need is to be doing my workouts with him as well. So I don't do workouts with Joe. Yeah.
There is so much of too much of a good thing. So I think you're allowed to do that. And I know you're big into your cycling, aren't you? So there's definitely different ways to keep fit. The last time I cried was when?
Oh, this is an easy one. Yesterday. Do you want to know why?
Yeah. Tell me why.
I cry a lot, actually. I think I might have shared that with you before. I'm very sort of sensitive and quite emotional. Both during kind of good times and difficult times. I cry a lot on our team calls, our company calls. Very often when it's sharing, positive and good news. So it's, but I did cry on a team call yesterday. So yeah, I'll probably cry on this podcast, mate. So ask me that again at the end of our chat.
I'm all for leaders being vulnerable. And I think it's something that I've learned over the years is not a bad thing at all. Since Sienna came along 7 years ago, I've definitely cried so much more. I think I almost used to think it was like a badge of honor to not cry. And that's so stupid. So I think there's a lot to be said for getting it out there and showing how you're feeling. So I think that's a good thing to hear, because not everyone always admits that they cry. All right, next one. If there was one thing I could change about entrepreneurship, it would be...
That's a hard one for me because I don't really feel like an entrepreneur. I don't in it when people call me one, or even I talk about entrepreneurship. Like I don't really sort of see myself or even what me and Joe have done as necessarily like, setting out to be entrepreneurs. But I definitely am growing a business and been growing a brand, and obviously it has been very an entrepreneurial journey. But I think for me personally, like what I would change about my current, and this again, really sure everyone can relate to this in some way, but finding balance between everything to do with work and the business, and then finding time for myself and my family, and being present. So it's not something I'd change about entrepreneurship necessarily, but I certainly would like to find a way to find some more balance and time in my own life, really.
No, that's a really good one, and I'd imagine a lot of people listening in our audience would probably share that, and I definitely do. It's the thing I find the hardest, to not feel like I'm letting people down, and actually try and carve out a bit of time for exercise, out a bit of time for friends. And you are definitely an entrepreneur. You're incredibly humble, but you definitely are, and I think one that our listeners are going to be really inspired to hear your story. So we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Final quickfire question is, my biggest failure to date is...
Oh gosh, there's been lots of ups and downs and failures, I guess, along the way. The biggest one to date, going back to what we were just talking about, I do constantly have a feeling of like guilt and failure around fitting it all in, and like being a present. I've got 2 young kids, and being a good dad. And I don't want to say I failed at being a parent, because I don't think I have, but I certainly have a feeling of like I'm not doing this right. Like I'm not finding the balance between being really ambitious and so driven with the mission and the work, and finding that kind of sweet spot of giving myself enough time to for everything. You mentioned exercise, time with my friends and family. Like I said, I don't know if it's a failure, but it feels to me like I'm not doing it well, and I feel like I need to do better. To me, it feels like I'm failing a bit in that sort of area.
I get that. I'm sure you're not, but I think it says a lot about you. And I feel very similar. I think it's because you're conscientious and you care. And I think when you care as much as you do about your mission and your family and your friends and all that, it's very hard to keep everyone happy. And it's something that I think I'll always battle with. I mean, family will always come first for me, but JBM is my second family. And you got to keep the lights on. So sometimes there are things that have to go by the wayside. And I think maybe throughout life, that's just a constant. Somebody told me, I think I've said this on the podcast before, about think of it like hobs on a stove. And, you can't always have all 4 hobs burning like full blast, because you'll burn the house down. But you might have at any one time 2 of them going quite strong and a couple simmering. And then there are different points in your life or a year where the other 2, you have to kind of turn up a bit and turn down. So I try and think of it a bit like that now, but I think it's something that people talk about a lot on the podcast, to be honest with you, particularly parents. And I think there's probably a lot more we can do to support each other in not feeling as guilty, and but also creating the sort of flexible working environments where parents can be parents still and be present parents, but also still do meaningful work. Nikki, thank you so much. Love your answer already. It's we've hopefully warmed you up now, and I want to dig straight into the story. And before we come on to the body coach and being a CEO and all that exciting stuff, I think it's always good to start at the beginning. So do you mind telling our listeners a bit more about your childhood and upbringing? Because I know it's played a key part in kind of who you are and why you do what you do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, some people may know my childhood and my story, and not because they've heard me talk about it, because they've heard Joe maybe talk about it. But we are both very open about our upbringing and stuff. But yeah, we had quite an unsettled childhood, I guess. My parents both struggled with addiction and mental illness and mental health issues. So, my dad's a recovering drug addict, and he's been in and out of rehab my entire life, really. My mum had quite bad eating disorders and OCD and sort of lots of anxiety. And so childhood was a bit sort of wild and quite unsettled, I guess. But we were also like really well, loved, and always felt like, even when my dad was at his lowest and my mum was not well, it was always knew that we were loved. We always had everything we needed. And yeah, we had, and I had there was a lot of support in our family. You know, I spent a lot of time at my nan's when I was younger as well. So, you know, we were well looked after, and I guess really lucky as well. Like we had, you know, went to good schools that, you know, I guess helped become part of that support and stability in our lives. But yeah, but overall, it was a pretty kind of quite a mad upbringing in many ways and a bit all over the place. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken about this a bit before, but it's well documented. And I think it's really great that you and Joe do share it, because I'm sure there's lots of people that are going through this that don't necessarily see high profile and successful people that actually share coming from similar types of backgrounds. So how has that helped you? You know, the sort of challenges in your earlier life. How has that helped you to become the person you are today, the leader you are today, the parent you are today? And I guess it would be also great to explore just, you know, that dynamic between you and Joe when you were growing up, how that relationship has evolved.
I think a lot of this, the answer to this question, I've only really started to like learn and over the last few years and piece together. Like in sort of, I've seen a therapist over the last year or two, and I've been on a bit of a journey with Joe. We made a documentary for BBC about parental mental health and sort of looked at, you know, Joe went and looked at his own upbringing to sort of as a kind of platform to have that discussion. So I've kind of, yeah, been on a bit of a journey really, looking back at some of this stuff and I guess learning about how it has impacted me. I think one thing that I always remember from a really young age was like being really aware that my parents, you know, weren't well. And I knew that my dad was using drugs and from a really young age. And I didn't sort of tell anyone that I knew, but I knew a lot of what was going on. And of course, your parents, like they try and protect you from things. So they probably tried to hide it, but I was always very, very vigilant and very aware of what was going on. And I remember like being quite young and thinking about how I was going to not do that and how like I wanted to sort of break the cycle. And I think I've always it's been quite conscious, like this thing of like I'm going to avoid going down that road. So I was always, you know, very anxious about drinking, and when drugs and alcohol started to kind of creep in as you get to teenage, you know, become a teenager, I was always very sort of like didn't want to be near it. I was very scared of drugs and addictions. Actually, my dad's got quite a lot of brothers, half brothers, and addiction has affected like 7 or 8 of our family have had addiction problems, and I was always really scared that it was like genetic and like, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, discussion about this, and I don't know, you know, what the sort of science is, but I mean, I kind of believe that it's probably a bit of both. I do think addiction, there can be genetic traits, but I was always really scared anyway of like, well, you know, when people started smoking, you know, weed in the park, and I was always like, no, I'm not. I was too scared of where it might lead because I guess I'd seen the worst version of like drug use, you know, and I was always very nervous. So I suppose that deterred me from a really young age. I didn't really start to drink until I got to uni. I wasn't like someone that sort of drank down the park when I was 16, when a lot of my friends were sort of starting on that sort of journey of experimenting with that kind of thing. So it definitely put me off. And I think, yeah, it definitely made me want to sort of break that cycle that my family historically has seen lots of addiction and all the you know, all the pain and that comes with that, right? Because it affects everyone around them. And yeah, so I think it has definitely shaped me. And obviously, you know, I think everybody background shapes them in some way, but in real kind of obvious ways, like, you know, deterrent in many ways, and also just wanting to do things differently.
Yeah, that's really admirable, because I guess you sometimes see the opposite to that, don't you? It's all you know, so you just follow suit and you go sort of down that path. Whereas I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to kind of break the cycle. But I think it's you know, clearly it's been great for you. And I guess like on your relationship with Joe as a kid, I guess as the big brother, were you very much the kind of keeping him protected from a lot of this? And how has your relationship over the years evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, again, that's something that I've really come to understand lately, like that protective role that I took with Joe. I mean, my mum had me when she was 16. She had Joe by the time she was 18. So she had, you know, 2 kids under 2, and she was still a kid herself, you know. And then, you know, obviously my dad was kind of in and out of our lives really. With when he was kind of relapsed or using, he would often not be there, and it'd be in, you know, my mum didn't try to keep us away from it as much as possible. So, you know, there was I definitely, looking back now and joining the dots of like my life and my relationship with Joe, I've definitely took that protective role, and also protecting my mum as well. Like I used to, know that my dad had used drugs, and I wouldn't tell her, like if I had seen or something, or I was even sort of protecting my mum probably as well. But I think going back to what you said earlier as well about, I think a lot of people expected me and Joe to be like go off the rails. It was almost like we had permission to, because of our, people knew our childhood was what it was. And I think I definitely didn't know it at the time, but I think looking back, a part of me was like, I heard conversations, like, well, you can't blame them, because we were quite naughty kids. Like we were, we did get in trouble at school. We weren't like horrible kids. There was obviously behavioural things were coming out in school and stuff that were probably a result of like the frustration at home, silly, like naughty behavior, like. And I think maybe deep down, like hearing that stuff, like, well, there was no expectation of like me and Joe to do anything. And I think a part of me was like, well, I'll show you. Like, I think looking back now, maybe there's a part of me that wanted to prove people wrong.
No, I love that. Sometimes what you need is that fire in the belly, and to prove the naysayers wrong. And I feel it's often the start of incredible journeys when you've got that kind of fire coming from within. Thank you so much for sharing, Nikki. I think it's a really it's a unique story, but actually not a unique story, because there are probably lots of people listening to this who have come from sort of similar types of backgrounds, but we don't always talk about it. And I think sometimes it's really good to get it out there and share. And clearly that relationship with Joe has blossomed and it only got stronger over the years. I know you're still incredibly close and you're working together, but I know that wasn't the plan, right? So do you mind telling our listeners just a bit about, I know you worked in publishing for a while, but how did it come about that you ultimately joined the Body Coach when you did? That wasn't intended, was it?
No, it definitely wasn't intended. No. So yeah, I did a law degree at uni originally, and I knew halfway through that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to finish it. I then took a year off. I went traveling after uni and was kind of like, figuring out, what am I going to do? And I was hoping that I was going to figure out what I was going to do. And I came back and had no idea still. But I did start to keep a sort of travel diary and a blog on MySpace, which I didn't even know what a blog was at the time. But I started to write kind of some of my travels. And when I got back, someone said, "Oh, your blog was hilarious. Like, you should be a writer." And I was like, I didn't even consider that was a job or a thing. So I actually just started to think about that and what it could mean, and ended up doing a master's in magazine journalism. I decided I was going to try and get, work in magazines. So did a master's, full-time master's for a year, and trained as a journalist. And then I did lots of work experience. I was working for free for 6 months. And yeah, I managed to get work in firstly B2B publishing. So I had a job at PR Week, which is a trade magazine for the PR industry. And then I moved over within the company from, it was with Haymarket in 2012, Haymarket won the contract for London 2012 to be there to do all the official publications for the Olympics. And I was like, oh God, I need to, how cool would it be to work on the Olympics in London? Like, be an amazing once in a lifetime. So I started asking around and managed to get a job, short term kind of contract, working on the magazines and the programs for the Olympics. So that was in 2012. And around the same time, I was living with Joe at the time at my dad's in Surbiton, and he had started his boot camp and doing his fitness in the park. And he shared this story a lot, but he started out doing morning boot camps and handing out flyers at the station, and for a long time nobody came. And that's a story that has been told many times by Joe, but I was kind of there with him, helping him. We'd all do a bit of flyering as a family in the evenings. And yeah, so I was doing my thing in magazines, and then I ended up taking a job in Singapore at Campaign magazine, which is, again, I sort of went back into trade press, Campaign Asia. So I was living in Singapore, and in the background, Joe was back here. Sort of things were starting to grow on his Instagram, and he was, we've always been close. So I was, we'd speak 10 times a day, and we were was very much sort of with him on that journey in the background, just as his brother, and obviously with my sort of media background, helping him with some things here and there. But yeah, and then I guess in 2015, he said to me, "Look, why don't you, this is starting to get some traction. Why don't you come back and help me?" And I said, "Absolutely not. There's no way. I'm, don't think working with family. I was worried that our relationship might suffer, like you just hear these stories of like working with your friends and family. So I kind of resisted it initially. And for a few months we were talking about it. And, in the end, I just thought, actually, like if I don't go and help him, maybe he'll end up getting some bad advice and I just sort of felt like I wanted to go and help him. And I guess now I sort of see it now, realizing I was actually probably trying to protect him from potentially, because his profile was growing and stuff like that. So I came back and yeah, it was originally I said, look, I'm not going to work for you. Like I'm not going to be an employee. I'll work with you. And my original role was head of content. And I said, I'm going to just kind of set up my own little thing and you can sort of be a client, I guess. I had this grand vision of building like an agency or something. I never did. Joe was my only client for that time. And yeah, I came back really kind of, leveraging my skill set as a journalist really, and like storytelling. And I was a, big believer in leaning into content. So we just said, right, let's, we had no plans to grow or to do any marketing or anything like that. But we said, let's just create lots of really amazing content. So, we started a YouTube channel. Obviously he'd already started the Lean in 15 videos. So we're just producing lots of content basically. And then over the years, I sort of got more involved with different areas of the business. And when we eventually decided to build an app, that was like a big shift in the shape of the business and the needs of the business. And yeah, I've kind of fast forwarded a bit. When we started hiring engineers to build our app, people were sort of going, "Oh, like who's the CEO? Like who am I reporting into?" And I was sort of like, got off the phone to Joe and was like, "I think I need to be the CEO. Like, I think we need a CEO. I think you're too busy, like doing everything that Joe does, and he's the face of the brand. Obviously, he's filming all the time, and sort of operationally, we didn't have anyone sort of to take on that role. So I guess I was officially kind of running the business anyway, without the title, but we made it official, yeah, a year or so ago.
So cool. How do you think you benefited from not coming from that traditional tech CEO background? Because it's not the normal route, but yeah, how has that helped?
I've not really thought about how it's. I mean, I guess there's like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, and I have like every day a new challenge comes in, and I'm literally trying to figure it out for the first time. But I don't think that's unique. I guess you can't train to be a CEO, can you? You can't really. I mean, unless you've done it before. I guess I didn't have anyone to learn from. Like, I've never seen or been inside a business that's growing. I've never been in meetings at that level of like leadership. So, the first thing, I mean, literally everything was starting from scratch, like building a leadership team. We had no processes. I mean, we had around 10 staff that have been with us 6 years plus, many of them kind of customer support heroes on our previous product, which was a PDF business. And that was like a really easy business to run. It had no kind of complexity that comes with, building teams and culture and and also having more senior people in the business. So to be honest, I think not knowing probably helped me take the leap to do it. I think if I had known how hard it was going to be, I might have thought about it differently. It might have scared me or put me off. And I was a bit naive, really, although, some good friends and mentors did sort of say, look, are you sure you want to go down this road? Because it's really hard. Like, and I'm only, over a year into it, and it is intense. And it's been a tough start to the year, and everything right now is new because it's the first time I've done it and the first time I've seen it.
Yeah. But I think the fresh eyes are actually really important, because I think sometimes if you learn from an amazing CEO and you've been through a startup journey, or maybe you've seen a few different, of course, you can take bits and you can kind of create your own version of it, but you are going to be influenced, I think, by what you've seen before. And that can be a good thing, but that can also be a bad thing. And I think if you just don't know any better and you're going off gut and you're going off instinct, and obviously you're putting the right people around you, I think sometimes that can be a really good way to do it, because there's a bit less pressure, I think, in that way, albeit I know you'll be putting yourself under tons of pressure, and you've got the pressure of, holding this great brand you've built, delivering for it. But I think in many ways, it's a good way to do it, albeit you're properly throwing yourself in at the deep end, which is challenging. I really hope you're enjoying today's episode so far. But before we continue hearing from today's mentor, I wanted to take a minute to give a shout out to our series sponsors, Alchemist. Alchemist is an industry-leading learning and development company using immersive and interactive experiences to help increase employee engagement,
levels of happiness and achievement across your teams, and overall productivity. Alchemist presents L&D departments with an opportunity to innovate and be bold in their approaches to blended learning. If you love the sound of this as much as we do here at JBM, then head over to thisisalchemist.com/40-minute mentor to learn more. And now back to our 40-minute mentor.
What's for sure is that, the Body Coach is this iconic brand. You've been like critical to that success from day one. And Joe is obviously seen as this national treasure, but you've always described it as this accidental business that kind of came about in a not a typical way. So can you explain a bit about that? And I guess for anyone that hasn't heard of it, I'd be surprised if that wasn't the case, but it's probably a good time to properly explain what the business is and does now and how it's evolved from sort of the early days.
Yeah, sure. So I touched on it earlier, but yeah, Joe started off as a personal trainer when he decided that was the path he wanted to go on. He had done some other things. He was a teaching assistant for a while, and he decided that he wanted to pursue the personal training career, and he's doing some one-on-one training, but then started this boot camp business in Richmond and Surbiton. He had two locations towards the end, but and then he started to sort of leverage social media and wanted to sort of just spread his message a bit more. Like, he's always kind of just wanted to get people moving and like help people sort of fall in love with exercise. And the boot camp business was going really well. And then, Instagram came along and he started sharing recipes on Instagram. There was the big moment, I guess, was when Instagram unlocked video. So the first ever iteration of Instagram video, which seems like 100 years ago now because it's such a video platform now. But, obviously it was images. The first video feature was you could do 15-second videos. And that's when he started posting video recipes. And Lean in 15 was 15-second videos of simple, quick, healthy meals that, were like often 15 minutes to cook, but shot in 15 seconds. So, it's kind of why that high energy, high talking fast, came from, because he only had 15 seconds to create a whole recipe, which people could then go away and like copy and cook. Yeah. Then, very organically started to grow his social following. At some point when he had around 50 or 60,000 followers, I think, he got approached, asked if he wanted to do a cookbook based on the Lean in 15 videos, and never had any intention to write a book. He'll be the first to admit, like, he's not even, he's not a trained chef. So he was like, how the hell can I write a cookbook? But he went on to get a book deal. That book, the first Lean in 15 book, went on to become the second fastest selling cookbook of all time. I think it still is. Jamie Oliver's is still the fastest selling, but yeah, like, incredible story really with the book, because it was, as I said, never an ambition or a plan. And yeah, the business, though, then he launched a digital PDF, an online training and nutrition plan, which was delivered in PDF form. And yeah, just very slowly started to kind of, as his Instagram following would grow, he would sell, well, more people would sign up to the 90-day plan. And then, yeah, he, when he called me and said, come and help me, let's try and reach more people, because it seems to be connecting with people. The brief was always the same. It was like, how can we help more people? Whether it was on the YouTube, which is a channel with over 600 workouts now, which is a free channel. We post a new workout every single week. There was the books, which were £6 or £7, depending on where you bought them. And then there was the paid product, the 90-day plan. So there was all the kind of these different touch points. And we just felt, well, let's keep building them all, because that means wherever you are, you can kind of have access to what to our message and to our content and stuff. So, that business was amazing. Like 600,000 people signed up to that 90-day plan during its life cycle. And then somewhere, down the line, we started to think about how can we make the product better, and make it easier for people to use. And there was a lot of limitations with a PDF and what you can do for customers. So, the kind of everything was pointing in the direction of building an app, really. So we started to think about it. And then we went and had a visit. We went to visit Headspace in Santa Monica around this time that we were thinking about building an app. And we had a really great meeting, went to their awesome office, and they hosted us for a coffee. And we walked in and there's like 300 odd people. And me and Joe were just like, wow, this is really cool. But like, we stood on this balcony and Joe said, like, who are like all these people? Like, what are they doing? And the guy said, I think it was like the VP of, I can't remember exactly, but he said, oh, they're most of them are engineers. And we left that meeting and we went down to the beach and we were like, bloody hell, like, if that's what building a successful app or tech company or tech product looks like. And it totally put us off. Like we were just like, it was just scary to think that that's what a successful seeing behind, because we're big fans of Headspace as well. So yeah, that put us off for a while. And then about a year passed and we just couldn't ignore the fact that we had this opportunity to make a better product that, could be more scalable and just a better experience for users. So we went on that journey. We hired an amazing agency to build our app. We invested a lot of money. We worked with a great agency and we invested it. We've always been self-funded. We've never raised any money. So we invested to build the app. They ran it it took us a year to build. After we started building the app, pandemic hit, and that took us on a whole nother path with with Joe, which was again a huge moment for Joe and for, I guess, it grew. There's the awareness of Joe and the body coach through the roof during those workouts. So we launched the app, agency ran it for a year, and then we obviously we always intended to bring it in house. So at the end of that point, I think the agency had 40 people working on the app across Android and iOS. And we essentially sat down and was like, right, we need to build a team that can carry on developing our app, but we wanted it in-house. So the last 12 to 18 months, we've been on that journey, and we're now, we've gone from sort of 10 people, all mainly customer support people and a couple of content people, to now a team of almost 40, and it's mainly now product and engineers. So in a year, we've grown, really quickly, and it's terrifying, really.
It's terrifying, but it's incredible. I mean, what a story. And I know some of the listeners will know bits of that, but it's great to hear it end to end, just kind of what a journey you've been on. And I guess a big part of your success is how authentic and what a great mission you have, which we'll come on to talk about a bit more. But thanks so much, Nikki. I guess to achieve the sort of success you have, it doesn't come without sacrifices and challenges. So what have been some of the biggest, gnarliest things you've had to deal with that we can share with anyone that might be going through a similar sort of struggles in startup life?
Yeah, I mean, it's the complexity that comes with building teams and people and managing people. And I found that really hard personally. And I think that we're very, we've always wanted to build a really great place to work and to have a place that people love to work. And hopefully, the fact that we had so many people that have stayed with us for 6 years plus, actually now 7 years, something. For a lot of the support team we've got now, many of them, it was their their first job and they're still with us. And I hope that's testament to the way we've tried to, I guess, build a culture. We didn't know we were building a culture back then. We just trying to kind of, it was never like, oh, what's our culture and what should our values be? We've only started having those conversations in the last year or two as we've hired senior people and building teams. So I found that really hard. And to be honest, James, this year has been literally the last 2 weeks. I haven't really talked about this, but we've had a really big challenge. We have had to restructure the team a little bit, and it's been the worst thing I've ever had to go through. Like, I've hated it. It's just been awful, and a lot of companies are going through this at the moment. And I naively thought that we were immune to the kind of market, because we're self-funded, and I just sort of felt that, and we've always been profitable, so we've never had to worry about sort of, I guess some of the challenges that startups have when you're funded and you've got a run rate and you're I've never felt we needed to worry about those. But in all honesty, we have had to make some changes to our engineering team this last 2 weeks, and it's been really tough. And I'm kind of right off the back of it, going through that. So I'd say that's been the toughest thing.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. And I mean, you're not alone, and it's the worst part of the job. We caught up for a coffee the other day, and I think I shared with you, it's always been the worst part that I've ever had to, letting anyone go is by far and away the worst part of my job and my career to date. So yeah, I'm sure there's lots of other people listening to this that will be able to resonate with that. I think, what advice do you have from your experience? Obviously, the team's grown incredibly quickly. I guess that's not been without its challenges, but you have been able to attract amazing people, and clearly your mission is a big draw there. But what advice do you have for anybody that might be going through that kind of growth journey at the moment, thinking about hiring? Like, what sort of tips and tricks have you got from your experience, and or anything else just from the people side of the business that's really helped the body coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm so new to some of this, but I can reflect on my own experience. Like, we've been really lucky. We've hired some really amazing people, and the team are great. And I'm very naive around like the technical side of what we need in terms of people's skills, and I had to sort of really trust, other people to take that side of it. Like, I don't know what good looks like in some of these roles, right? And I think though for me, I was very like, and I interviewed every single, person that came in to the team over the last year. And I was just really trying to find people that cared about what we were trying to do. And, we have been a family business. We are, a family. We're literally family business in the sense of me and Joe being family. And we've also got, my cousin works for the business, and the team that we've had, that first group, that support team that have been with us a long time, they do feel like family, like, because they've been with us for so long. I guess I knew that that would be harder to maintain as we grew, but I also felt like, but we could try and look for, traits and really find people that were on, get the mission. And I think we've done that really well. And it's been very a conscious effort to really find people that were looking for a new role where they're really going to be impacting people, like wanted, and lots of people do want to work for businesses that are, have such a strong purpose. So we really emphasize that in our hiring process, and it's really shown in the way the team has bonded, like around this like single focus of like, right, how can we just help one more person each day, like get moving, like one person each day. Like that's always been the thing me and Joe have talked about. Like if we create a YouTube workout and only one person does it, like it was worth doing. So we're not interested in a million views. We're interested in like, did someone do the workout? And we try to carry that through, like, and really, I suppose for me, like what I've realized is I feel like I'm a broken record, like, and I'm saying the same thing all the time. But actually, I think people like to be reminded of it. They like to be, they're energized by the mission and talking about it. And in my head, I was, oh God, I'm always talking about the purpose and what we're trying to do. And, people must be sick of hearing about it. But I don't think they are. Like, I don't know if they'd tell me if they were, but I think deep down, like, I think people do just, they love to be reminded, and we, in our offsites, we always bring a customer and we try and find someone who's been on the journey with us, like a client or a customer, to share their story. And, because we're an app and we're a digital business, and even with social, like it's all virtual connections and relationships, but there's nothing more powerful than seeing someone telling you like they've changed their life or they've transformed their life, by doing our workouts or using our app or cooking our recipes. And we just try and bring the customer as close to the team as we can as well.
Yeah, and I think that DNA, that values alignment in the company, and that there's that DNA within the team that, it just, especially through the difficult times. You've mentioned that the year has started off in a challenging way, like it has for so many. But I think that DNA within, where everybody's so passionate about what they do, that often, stands you in good stead, particularly during the harder times. And I think one thing that you've done incredibly well is, you've obviously built this huge following and got this large customer base across all the different channels. I know recently that you opened your first fitness studio, which was incredible. You've got the YouTube channel, all the social media and the books, and that is very, very hard to do, but it's authentic. And everybody so many friends of mine, are consumers. And I wanted to ask you about the evolution of the brand, and if you've got any advice for anyone listening that's trying to lean in right now to marketing and social media, because it's not easy to do, but you've done it in such a way that is never, I think it is so authentic to the mission. And sometimes people chase vanity metrics and they get distracted and they go off in all different ways. But it seems like you've done it in such a way that it hasn't lost that core. So any advice there for anybody that may be struggling with that?
I think that the vanity metric thing is a good point. I think there's so many, certainly when you're building on social, like, is it about getting a million views or is it about engagement? I mean, for us, we actually quite early on made a pretty kind of conscious decision to sort of, we said, let's focus on like engagement and depth versus just like growing the numbers for numbers' sake. So we are always trying to sort of draw a line back to like impact, like what did this thing do? Like, did people do a workout? Or did they cook the recipes, or did they download, the free budget recipe pack? Like, and I think that's all happened quite organically, because when Joe started posting video recipes, what was amazing, like, was you'd post a video at like 4 p.m. and like people would then go home and get on the train, and they'd be like flicking for Instagram. And this was back in the old days where like it was all chronological order as well. So we used to be like really mindful, like, let's post breakfast recipes in the morning, and like let's post dinner recipes in the afternoon. And people would then, like, at 6-7 o'clock, we'd get all these pictures coming in, like on people sharing on social, like, I saw your recipe on the way home, I popped into Sainsbury's and bought the ingredients and I've just made it, and like it was lovely. Or I was about to get a pizza, but then I saw your recipe. Like, so we've always just fed off that, like, and it's really what I guess we saw that happening, and we just kind of, just in the way we work, like, we always tried to create content that's useful and valuable. Joe's not one to sort of lean into, he doesn't sort of do many trends that often now you kind of have to play the game a bit with the algorithms to get the reach and the views. But it's been really easy to say like no to things when you're so clear on it. Well, does it do the thing we want it to do, which is like get people moving, get them to cook a recipe, or get them sort of or for example, we talk about mental health and sleep a lot now as well. Like, can we help inspire people to go to bed a bit earlier because they're gonna feel better? So I think focusing on like what do you want the outcome to be, like, because it's really easy to get 1 million views on Instagram or TikTok. Like, I always use this example, but like if you post a video of a cat doing sit-ups, like, you're probably going to get 1 million views quite easily. And look, entertainment is great. Like, making people laugh is also a good thing, right? I think Joe's great at also just making people smile sometimes, even when you think about those first Lean and 15 videos, like throwing rice across the kitchen, and it was entertaining as well. So I'm not saying that entertainment isn't important, but yeah, I think we are focused on like, what does this thing help people do? I don't know if there's any advice in there. I've just sort of ranted a bit.
No, it really helps. I think you have such a clear purpose and focus that guides a lot of the decisions you make. Whereas you sometimes feel that brands and companies are kind of chasing the, how everyone else is doing it, or the current fad. Whereas if you kind of stick to what you're trying to achieve, I think there's a lot to be said for that, and just focusing on what customers love and what people genuinely get a lot of value from. And I think that's authentic, and I think that really comes across. Nikki, I'm conscious of time. There's a couple more questions I want to ask before we get to our wrap up. And I guess just coming back to you and your brother, Joe, is obviously very well known now, and you've talked about being, protective big brother. So how do you support him with the pressure and expectations that come with this intense media spotlight and all the, being dragged in all the different directions? How do you do that? And I guess linked to that question, how do you also balance your role and the brand responsibility as CEO with Joe being a brand in his own right? I just wanted to touch upon that quickly.
Joe's really good actually at like balance, and he's very focused, loves his family, and he's always been much better than me at sort of carving out time for himself. And so in many ways, like in the moment, he's probably protecting me actually, or trying to, because I think he can see that I'm stressed. He can see that lots going on, and he's probably more worried about me than I'm worried about him, which is a bit of a role reversal really. But and that's because it is really demanding. Like anyone that leads has a business or is a leader or a CEO, like, it is really hard. And he can see that, and he worries about me a lot. So at the moment, he's sort of like trying to get me to to have a day, have some time off, or make sure you're looking after yourself. But in terms of Joe it's funny because I don't see Joe as a celebrity or as being famous. Like, he's still he's still my little brother, like, so, and he doesn't see himself as a celebrity or being famous either, really. So there's not really much like we have to do in that space. He gets asked to do a lot of TV, and he doesn't really, he turns a lot of stuff down. We did make the documentary, obviously, and again that came about, and we sat down and we looked at it as an opportunity, and we thought, well, this actually feels like something that can help people, like that issue of parental mental health, and using our story or Joe's story to talk about that. And we were hoping that it would help people start a conversation. So there was a real like good reason for Joe to do that TV, but this is in the press every year. But he gets asked to go on Strictly Come Dancing, and he doesn't, or whatever it may be, and he just doesn't really want to do that stuff for the sake of it. Really, he's very grounded.
I mean, it sounds like that's who he is, but also like you've got his back in a way that I guess in other situations, other startups, it'll be a very different dynamic in the with CEOs and founders and stuff. And it's just so nice that your relationship is stronger than ever, and you can both protect each other, just as he's trying to look after you right now. I just think it's so nice to hear. Well, thank you, Nikki. I've got one more quick question before we wrap up, or get to our final wrap up questions. And that's just, we're recording this in January 2023. We know a lot of our listeners will be looking to build better fitness habits this year. So what just final bits of advice can you give them about trying to make habits stick and how to lead a slightly healthier, more active life in 2023?
Oh, I wish I had the answer for everybody on that. It's really hard. Motivation comes in waves. Like, it's hard to be on it all the time. And I think, we try, and even with New Year's resolutions, like, it's very difficult to be on it all the time. And even Joe, he talks about this openly, like he's the fittest person I know. But there are times where he has trouble with motivation as well. And he's eating marmalade on toast at 10 at night and stuff. But I would just say, look, keep it. I mean, for me personally, it's keeping it really simple and just focusing on, like, we talk about sort of like little wins, like, drinking plenty of water, obviously exercising every day if you can. I think sleep is so important. Like, I've really come to realize that, if I do get enough sleep or more sleep, I make better food choices. I'm more likely to exercise. I've just got more energy to do all of these things that we need to do. So I think that, and we give ourselves a hard time, right? That's the problem with goals. When we stop, we then we can be quite hard on ourselves. I've been trying to get up at 6 a.m. To try and find a bit more time in the day to get my exercise done first thing. And I'm not a morning person, so this is a huge deal for me. But what I've come to realize is I need to be in bed and asleep by like 10:15, and then I can get up at 6 and I can do that. But if I don't get into bed and it's later, if I get to bed at 10:30, 11, I now just don't try, because I'm setting myself up for failure. So I just go, do you know what? I didn't manage this today. I'll try again tomorrow. It's just about being kind to yourself. Obviously I'm a big believer, exercise is the key to everything. Like, I think energy, it gives us energy, it improves our mental health, it resets our stress. For me, it's a real coping mechanism for the demands of, like, running a business, for sure. It's my release. One of the big game changers for me, I've been doing these since the pandemic, really, but I call them walkie talkies. And basically, any meeting that I have, if I don't need a screen, I do them on the phone and I walk. So I might have 4 walkie talkies in a day, and I'm walking for like half an hour at a time, and I'm getting loads of steps in, I'm getting out, I'm getting fresh air. The meetings are really productive. If we could have done this podcast on a walkie-talkie, I would have done it. But I'd say trying it. That's a really nice way to, like, incorporate movement and fresh air and nature into your day whilst being productive.
Love that. Such a good tip. Thanks, Nikki. We're at a close, so I've got 3 final quick questions for you. In one sentence, what do you think the future holds for the Body Coach?
I think the Body Coach is going to go on to help more people in more places, and will be a brand that you can access in multiple places, whether it's online or in a physical space. Or we're going to reach more people around the world and help more people, feel fitter and healthier.
Amazing. And if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I'm going to say I'm a massive fan of Disney, the Disney brand. I just love Disney. I love everything they do. I've just been to Disneyland with my little boys at Christmas, and they're just the ultimate brand for me. And the legacy, the legacy they've built, and I really aspire to that. So, Bob Iger, I read his book about 3 times now. It's called Ride of a Lifetime, and it's his kind of journey. It's the best book ever if you've not read it. I would love Bob Iger to be my mentor, because he, to me, is just a fantastic leader and CEO. And so if you're listening, Bob,
Yeah, Bob, give us a ring. Love that. That's such a good answer. And finally, Nikki, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received that you can pass on to our 40-minute mentor listeners?
This advice isn't translatable, so it's really useless for everyone listening. But, the best piece of advice that someone gave me personally that went on to probably change the course of my life was when I was at sixth form. My psychology teacher, I was very open with him about what was going on at home, and it was particularly bad around that time when I was 18. And he took me into the office and sat me down, and he said, "You have to go to uni." He's like, "You need to do whatever it takes." And it wasn't like to do a particular course. Like he was saying to me, he said, "You need to get away and live on your own for a bit and get out of, the situation for a while." And I'd never really thought seriously about uni and at that point. And, I ended up going to uni and just picking a course that I thought sounded good. And it did change my life, really, because looking back, it got me on the path that I am now. But I'm sorry that's not useful for anyone else.
No, that's amazing. That's great to hear. And I think it just goes to show sometimes you've got to take yourself out of certain situations and give yourself new experiences, and it can open amazing doors. That's an amazing place to end it. Nikki, I'm a huge fan. I love your vulnerability. I love the brand that you've built with Joe. And, I know your mentorship is just what we need to hear at the beginning of the year. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Again, I guess for the second time, but officially for the first time, on your own. And I'm buzzing to see what the rest of 2023 has in store for you and the team. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me. And I hopefully see you soon.
Sounds good. Cheers, mate. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. I really hope you enjoyed Nikki's mentorship and learning more about his incredible journey with the Body Coach. As always, if you'd like to find out more about what Nikki and Joe are up to, or our sponsors Alchemist, please make sure you check out the links in the show notes. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of the latest episodes. I'll see you again next week for another dose of pocket-sized mentorship.